Good evening. My name is Sally Clark. I am the chair of the Seattle City Council's Committee on the Built Environment. I'm joined here so far by council members Sally Bagshaw and Tom Rasmussen, and we anticipate being joined soon by council member Tim Burgess. This is a special meeting of the City Council's Committee on the Built Environment, and I should note actually for the record that today is Tuesday, October 11th. It's approximately 6:10 p.m. We are not in Seattle City Council chambers, as people watching this can tell from the background. We're actually at the West Seattle Senior Center. I want to thank the West Seattle Senior Center for allowing us to be in here tonight. It's a great opportunity for us to be able to hold a meeting in the heart of the junction, because the subject matter that we are talking about all revolves around what's called the West Seattle Triangle. There are some maps and some details that we'll go through in just a moment with staff explaining that a little bit more. A number of us have spent time out here at the West Seattle Senior Center, and I want to thank them for the great work that they do, providing a terrific space, a terrific opportunity for social experiences, hot meals, the cafe over on the other side, opportunity for healthcare check-ins. I was supposed to call bingo a couple of weeks ago. I got waved off. I won't stand for it again. Next time I get scheduled for bingo, they're having me. And they do a terrific job out here. So we, again, are here. This is officially a public hearing on a proposed package of rezone and land use and streetscape changes for what's called the Triangle. And this is an area that's had a lot of conversation recently because it's an interesting area, within the greater West Seattle set of neighborhoods. Also because there are a set of properties that have experienced some change. They've experienced change in ownership, they've experienced new development, or they are likely to experience new development in the near future. And also because Rapid Ride, the fancy new bus system that will have real-time information and connect people quickly with the downtown area, will be having 2 stops on different sides of the Triangle area, and will again provide kind of a great impetus for people to use transit and to get them quickly, hopefully quickly where they're going. So before I hand it over to staff to talk about the details, Councilmember Tom Rasmussen, I don't know, Tom, if you want to say anything about the proposal as introductory. You've had a lot of conversations with the community in this area and have your roots in this area.
Let me untangle this. Going back, I would say about 2 years, I started talking to property owners and residents of the neighborhood about the opportunities here, because there are a lot of vacant lots, and there's lots of asphalt now, and this is an amazing location. It's the entrance to West Seattle, and so we have a great opportunity to plan this in a way that really creates the vision for the community, which is a very walkable, neighborhood-friendly community that welcomes businesses, that welcomes new residents. It wants the current businesses to stay here. We don't want anyone to feel unwelcome or elbowed out. And so it's quite a challenge to make all of these things happen in a built environment. But this is the best time to do it before a lot of the construction and the building does occur, which I am very certain will be occurring over the next several years. So I really appreciate all the activity and the involvement and the interest of the residents and the business owners in this neighborhood. I'm sure will make for a very good plan.
Thanks.
And I also want to recognize Brian Hoxford of my staff, who's been sitting in on almost all of the meetings of this. He's been very, very helpful to me as well as to the community.
I'll note before the meeting here, Councilmember Bagshaw and I had the opportunity to walk around with a crew of West Seattle folks talking about the Triangle area, and so walking around in a little bit of rain, a little bit of wind, but not too bad. So I want to thank those folks for doing both that meeting, and a number of you are here also for the hearing tonight. Particularly, I want to thank Denny Onslow, because he makes a darn good cookie, and being able to sit down in the space in the Link building was great in order to be able to talk a little bit about the vision and the motivation for the folks who came together and said that they want to try to chart and plan the future of how that property will be used over time. What else should I touch on before we move this over? I guess I'll note we do have a regular meeting of the Committee on the Built Environment tomorrow morning. That's a 9:30 a.m. start time in Seattle City Council chambers. Not quite as fun as being out here at the Senior Center, but still a nice building. And that is that is the next scheduled meeting that we have for the Committee on the Built Environment. So the plan here tonight is to primarily hear from you all. What we usually do in these format meetings, in these public hearing meetings, is ask for staff to do a brief synopsis of the proposal, of the plan, and to ground people in exactly what it is that we're talking about, in case there are new folks in the room or in case there are folks watching who are not familiar with the proposal. So I think with that, I will ask Norm to introduce himself for the record and to go through that staff report. In the meantime, or that brief staff synopsis, I won't call it a full staff report, we also have staff from the Department of Planning and Development here in case there are questions, technical questions that come up during the course of tonight's hearing. If you've not had a chance to sign up yet, but you are here to do public testimony, it'd be really great to sign up, because as soon as Norm's done, then we will go into the public testimony portion. And with that, David is adjusting the light so that we no longer see the beautiful sunset, but that's better for the camera people, I'm sure. And now I'll hand it over to Norm.
Thank you. Norm Schwab, Council Central Staff. As Councilmember Clark mentioned, I'm going to give you a brief synopsis of the proposal, but before doing that, I wanted to also talk a little bit about the process leading up to the development of the plan.
So actually, well, let's adjust that first. Maybe you might have to unwind it. I see that it's actually taped on the floor. You're not going to get enough. Yeah, there we go.
Is that better?
That's
there
okay.
We go. Now I can hear the feedback. Okay. As was mentioned, Councilmember Tom Rasmussen and the Department of Planning and Development convened a 12-member advisory committee of residents, businesses, and other community organizations in late 2008 to follow up on ideas first expressed in the West Seattle Neighborhood Plan adopted by the Council in January of 1999. 3 products came out of that planning process: an urban design framework, a streetscape concept plan, and zoning and land use recommendations that are the subject of the meeting this evening. The Council's Committee on the Built Environment received its first briefing on the West Seattle Triangle project on July 27th. At that meeting, the focus was an overview of the design framework and the concept plans. The committee was briefed on September 14th on the specifics of the rezone proposal, including new development standards for the proposed neighborhood commercial 85-foot zoned area. After tonight's public hearing, the committee will meet next on November 16th to review the proposal and to discuss possible amendments. Staff will provide the committee with a briefing and analysis of potential options. The committee is then likely scheduled to meet again on November 30th and on December 14th to continue their review and possibly vote on the amendments. So now I'd like to briefly summarize the proposal, which is shown on the map to my right. The first recommendation is to rezone from general commercial C1 zoning to neighborhood commercial 3 NC3 zoning throughout the Triangle planning area. This would encourage new development that would be neighborhood-oriented and pedestrian-friendly in design, while allowing existing businesses to operate and expand. The second recommendation is to establish a pedestrian designation along Southwest Alaska Street between the Junction Business Area and Southwest 36th Street. The P designation would require a higher intensity of pedestrian-oriented design and retail uses along the street front to better provide pedestrian connections between the junction and the Triangle business districts. The third recommendation is focused on an approximately 2-block area west of 38th Avenue Southwest and near the intersection of Fauntleroy and Alaska, the area in blue on the map to my right. This would increase the allowable height to 85 feet through incentive zoning. Density above the existing limit of 4.75 FAR, floor area ratio, up to a maximum of 5.5 FAR, would be achieved through participation in the City of Seattle's Affordable Workforce Housing Program. Development standards specific to this blue-colored area are also recommended in order to provide for open areas for pedestrian access and landscaping, and to complement the Triangle Street concept plan. The recommended development standards include, first, an upper level 10-foot setback along Southwest Alaska Street beginning at 45 feet in building height. The second is 80% lot coverage limit for structures on lots over 40,000 square feet in size. The third would limit the maximum structure width to 275 feet. And the fourth would require a separation of 30 feet between structures that are wider than 250 feet in the north-south direction. And the last item that I wanted to mention in the summary is that the existing height and density in the Triangle Business District east of 38th Avenue, which is to the east of the blue colored area, would retain its existing height and density. As was noted on our walking tour earlier this afternoon, in this area there are many very small businesses, and there is a desire to preserve the overall scale of that business district.
So now I'm going to tease out just a couple of things from the report just to better understand this. The rezoning from a C to an NC means that you have a wider array of things that you can do, more flexibility, or?
Actually, it means that you have a focus on more pedestrian-oriented commercial activities, going from the C1, which allows more auto-oriented commercial activities.
Okay. And then, how are you going to explain floor area ratio, what that is?
Floor area ratio is a planning concept that allows you to take the density that you are allowed in a particular zone and arrange it in different floor plates. And so you can have a higher, within the height limit that is established for that zone, you can have a higher, skinnier building, or you can have a lower, wider building. It allows for more flexibility in design.
Any other questions for Norm before we move forward? David, if I could get the sign-up sheet. I'll say Norm touched on a few things that we heard in the walking tour and discussion before this meeting. The importance of the Triangle as a gateway to West Seattle. Really, that it's the area you have to go by or you have to go through when you're coming up from the bridge. That there is a desire to increase that pedestrian connection back and forth from California. For those of us who are big fans of the Husky Deli and Bakery Nouveau, this is particularly important. And maintaining the interesting mix of uses that make it an interesting place now, as well as you're able to layer in the residential. If there are no questions for Norm or any other comments, then I think we'll just go to the public hearing. Councilmember Rasmussen.
You did mention the setbacks, but I know that preservation of view and sunlight is important to this neighborhood. We've heard it a number of times. So are there any other proposals that would help to preserve the views to the east and west, especially, as well as sunlight at the upper levels, so that we don't inadvertently block out the sun of the views that people enjoy in this area?
Yes, there's a proposal in the, as part of the proposal for the blue zoned area, there would be an upper level setback for buildings that would allow for light and air. And that would start at 45 feet for buildings that are higher than 55 feet in height.
And is that on all sides of the building? Or just along Alaska?
Just along Alaska.
Okay. So with that, I think we'll go ahead and we will go to the public hearing. The reason we have gathered you all here today. The challenge with doing some of these hearings, even when we're in chambers, is figuring out how to make this not just Seattle Channel facing at the back of somebody's head. So what we've done is set up the microphone over here to the right. And if you can use that microphone and kind of, tilt yourself a little bit, it'll make it somewhat easier for your family to identify you later on and then ask for your autograph because you have testified on Seattle Channel, which is very exciting. So the first 3 people who are signed up, and generally we allow about 2 minutes, but we don't have a huge crowd here tonight, so I'd be happy to go to 3 minutes with folks. Patty Mullen, Erica Karlovitz, and Tyler Johnson. And welcome Councilmember Burgess. Oh yes, I have that.
Good afternoon, good evening. Just a couple of things, and one is I really want to acknowledge the Department of Planning and Development for all of their work. Brian as well, but Susan and Robert Scully, the team out of DPD, they were just amazing. So thank you all so much. Yeah, and the project goals as outlined in this document kind of mirror what I'd like to underscore right now. We have not taken a formal position on the 85 feet or the rezone at the chamber, but the businesses in that district really got to identify themselves and come out as feeling really good about what they're providing to the community. So building on what's great about the triangle and planning for the future is one of the goals that we'd like to underscore. And also it's pointed out that we want to support the continued success of the small businesses in that district, and that includes the existing businesses. And then just pay special attention, I think, as Alki Lumber has pointed out, that there are commercial loading concerns in that area that really are demanded by that business. Thank you.
Thank you, Patty. David, could I get you to adjust that microphone down so that people are not having to look around it in order to...
Some short person coming.
I think if we can get people closer to it, then the reverb goes down, we can come down with sensitivity a little bit. Yeah. Hello, Erica, hello.
Hi, I'm with the Junction Neighborhood Organization, as well as I was a member of this Triangle Advisory Planning Committee for the past, feels like a few years. I first wanted to point out that I think that the pedestrian zone and the rezone to the NC 365 is a great idea for this neighborhood. I think bringing more of that diversity of use into the neighborhood while maintaining respect for the existing businesses that are there and how they're currently structured is incredibly important. What, as a neighborhood, we are not in favor of is the increase in height to 85 feet. Well, it is bordering an L2 zone, which is a 35-foot height maximum, as well as a single-family 5,000 zone. That's really not an appropriate height limit to have that great of a difference between the zones and really negatively impact the residential community here. We did feel that this could be accomplished in other ways, but the trade-off, we didn't feel like there was a positive yield for giving up that increased height for the residential community. And we had brought up numerous suggestions in the Triangle Advisory process that weren't incorporated into that plan. And I think to allow an increase in height without looking at the greater benefit to the community in what a residential community would benefit from is a missed opportunity. We have a lot of challenges in this neighborhood with varying height densities in a very small area, and to rezone one small area and not look at the impacts of the surrounding zoning is a real challenge right now.
Okay, can you say one more time, who are you representing tonight?
The Junction Neighborhood
The
Organization.
Junction Neighborhood Organization. Thank you. Councilmember Bagshaw.
Thank you. Erica, can I, just to clarify, are you saying that you're opposing the 85 feet altogether? Or
Yes.
just 85 feet in some particular area?
I'm opposing the 85 feet altogether.
Thank you.
Councilmember Rasmussen.
Could you provide us with the alternatives that you suggested?
Sure.
Okay.
Um,
You don't necessarily need to speak to them unless Councilmember Clark,
We have shared this with DPD as well, but I'm happy to.
sure.
Sure.
I don't know if Councilmember Clark wants to hear those
If
now,
you wanted to-
or you want
yeah.
to submit them in writing, either one.
It'd be great to have both. I mean, if you want to touch on them, and then if you can either, if it's ready tonight, then David could take it, or if you want to email
Yeah,
us. either.
actually, Tom, I think you have a copy of it because I've sent that to you in the past, but I can resend. I'm happy to do
We're on
that.
the record now, so.
Yep.
Okay, on the
Yep.
record. Some of the things that we talked about throughout the triangle planning process was a fully funded and implemented Fauntleroy Boulevard concept. Again, if we're going to create a pedestrian zone, we need to make that a safer pedestrian zone, and looking at some of the street issues there and the traffic flow issues will help with that. One of the other things that we've talked about is the transit issues in the neighborhood are pretty extensive. I get emails daily from residents in the neighborhood about the issues around parking. And so that was a lot of time spent in these meetings talking about parking and either a need for restricted parking zones in the residential areas that are caught in between these more commercial areas in the middle of a transit hub with Rapid Ride coming, and even today existing, are patterns of commuters coming and parking in the residential streets and making it a real challenge for residents to find anywhere to park. So if we could look at park and ride options in conjunction with RPZs to sort of disincentivize some of the commuting issues that we're having in the neighborhood, that would be very well received by the residents in the neighborhood.
That came up on the walking tour too, just even the idea of just doing 2-hour parking or 4-hour parking to prevent people from parking there all day.
And then we've also talked about an opportunity to create more park area within the triangle zone, which is a little bit lacking at the moment. So again, if we're going to increase pedestrians, let's give them a place to sit and enjoy the space.
Thanks. Councilmember Burgess. Very popular.
So if all of those things were done, what would your view be on the 85 feet?
Well, I still think it's a challenge to have it right up against it, but I think that you could look at 85 feet in a different area within this neighborhood as a potential, and I think that's something that could be re-examined. But if you don't mind, I mean, this is an L2 zone right here, this is single family zone, this is an L2 zone, this is an L2 zone, this is a single family zone. So you're increasing height in the middle of this area where you have a 35-foot zone. So it's a real challenge.
I think we're done with you.
Okay.
Thanks. Very popular. Tyler. And Tyler will be followed by Denny Onslow and then Sharon Meeks.
I'm Tyler Johnson. I'm here on behalf of one of the ownership groups for a property that's not included in the 85-foot up zone, but we would like to have it included if council goes forward. I'll just show it right here. It's 4,000 Southwest Alaska, 4022 Southwest Alaska, 2 parcels there. We think it's important to have Southwest Alaska develop as a vibrant commercial corridor that links the triangle and the junction areas. And we think that a more uniform zoning there furthers that objective. Having these parcels included in the upzone also allows for a little bit more flexibility in the development, allows the ground floor level to be developed in a way that frankly has more flexibility for higher quality retail, higher ceilings at the ground floor level. So we also think that by being included, we recognize that there are some trade-offs and the pedestrian-friendly amenities, but we think that overall it would be a positive to have these parcels included, and would improve that whole corridor between the triangle and the junction. Thank you.
Thank you, Tyler. Denny Onslow, followed by Sharon, then Steve Healing.
Denny Onslow with Harbor Properties, and actually I thought I signed in the, not to speak, but I will now that I have the opportunity, so.
I'm surprised.
Yeah. I would support all three, certainly in reference to in the triangle, getting more NC, getting more neighborhood friendly as we create more pedestrian, much more greater opportunity to get things that just really do increase the popularity, the animation, and the edges of the triangle. And the pedestrian zone on Alaska, I think we already talked about that a little while ago, but certainly there with the, I think the main thing I would really emphasize in all of this is that the bus rapid transit is a huge public investment, frankly, right to the federal level. We're very fortunate to have it. And it kind of goes to the issue of density, and I know people think, oh my gosh, but it is about where do we put people, where do we make it a better place. And when it gets to the 65 and the 85, I frankly, we have a building 65 feet, which is the link, and just a few blocks away, the Bureau building is 85 feet. And most people don't realize the difference, and it really is one story. But the issue really is where, in that extra extra 10 feet, you can make retail, and we're in a sloping area. I mean, unfortunately, Seattle is not a flat area. And those slopes, when you measure in that, it really gives you a great opportunity to do better, higher ceilings and more gracious retail or residential on the ground floor. So that extra, it actually is, it adds so much more to the, I think, to the ability to do better buildings, and then to create that area and a little bit more people and services around the bus and the stations and that. So I would support all three. Thanks.
Thank you. Chair? Followed by Steve Healing, then Brandon Nicholson, and then David Amaguchi.
Good evening. Actually, I wasn't sure what I was signing up for either, so I just wrote my notes down. I'm Sharon Meeks. I'm here as a resident in the Triangle adjoining area. I'm also the president of the Fairmont Community Association and have worked on the advisory group for the last 2 years, and also was involved in several of the other planning types of committees that have been formed in the city. I'll be very brief. Our initial reaction was very much like Erica's. Erica and I were actually the only two residential neighbors as owners that were present on this advisory committee. It was heavily weighted towards business. We do support the Alaska Street revitalization that's going on there, and we want those smaller businesses to stay in our community. I have 5 points. The pedestrian zone, we feel, should extend all the way down Alaska Street to 35th and should go down 35th. We had anticipated that this would tie into the Fauntleroy Boulevard design, and that is what we have worked towards. We think setbacks should apply to Fauntleroy as well, not just Alaska Street, because the canyon effect that will come through there will not be advantageous to opening up views and keeping what the neighborhoods that are currently living there have come to appreciate and pay taxes on. The parking study that was conducted was so totally inadequate and did not include anything that had to do with what was already being in the planning stages. It is now essentially impossible to cross Alaska Street either from 36th, 37th, or 38th. You have to wait and pull, creep forward. When you have Rapid Ride coming through there as well, it's only going to create an even more dangerous scenario for all the families that live on that hillside that are trying to get across Alaska to go down to the Y. We also do not support the 85 feet in any area that is associated with this planning that has been ongoing now. We think it's too much density. We think it's not being shared by other urban villages that are here in the West Seattle area. We appreciate the fact that you're redeveloping gray fields. We appreciate the fact that it's becoming more vibrant, and we want to encourage that, but we don't want to take the lion's share of the density levels when you have other areas that could be sharing this with us. And that's essentially my comments. Thank you.
Thanks for making them up on the fly.
Yeah.
Mr. Healing.
Well, thank you, Sharon. I followed you in, so that's why I'm on the registered list of speakers. But there have been a couple of questions. I'm Steve Hewling, and I am also on the advisory council for the Triangle, and I'm a resident of West Seattle and have been all my life. And we have a major part of the properties that are affected by this. It's not my decision to make, but I would like to point out, since the question or the issue was raised, that right through this area, if you follow Fauntleroy into the blue area, it's not a flat piece of property. So 85 feet is still going to be below the property in back of it. I'm just pointing that out to the council. It's not because the properties in back of going up to 41st are on an incline. This is all elevated. So, you know, that's not my call. I do have a question that the first gentleman to speak. That was a fairly quick definition of the difference between NC 3 which was pedestrian focused versus automotive focused for the C165. So I was just curious to know, more definitive what exact. I think there's more to it than that, and I thought maybe the people in the room might like to hear about the setbacks. One other thing, if I could, before I release the mic, is that in this FAR, which I believe is the footing area ratio, flooring ratio, everybody would like to have more parks. And again, I'm not a developer, that's not my call, but again, to point out to the people that are listening that in that formula, where you're going up more, the foundation, the footing, the floor ratio is less. So you've got more open space and as part of that requirement, there are park and green areas in that area. Is that correct? So it's kind of a compromise, but I think that should be pointed out, that it is a compromise. So, thank you.
Norm, do you want to highlight a couple of other differences between commercial and neighborhood commercial?
Other than just automotive and
Okay, sure.
pedestrian?
Let me run through this fairly quickly. So all of the existing uses in the C1 zone would be allowed outright in either the C1 zone or the NC3 zone. However, food processing and the incorporation of drive-in lanes would be limited under an NC3 zone designation. There are other aspects of the NC zone that affects the development standards, and that was what I was alluding to, and that includes, for instance, blank walls facing the street are allowed in a C1 zone. They are not allowed generally in an NC zone. Transparent facades are allowed but not encouraged in a C1 zone. They are required generally in NC zones. Off-street parking in front of the building is allowed in the C1 zones, generally not allowed in the NC zones. Off-street parking below or behind or beside the building is generally required in the NC zones, and that is not typical in the C1 zones. And again, drive-in businesses are allowed in the C zones with some few conditions, and they are limited in the NC zones. Does that? Thank you.
Helpful. Brandon Nicholson, followed by, Renee, how do we say your last name? Commons. Brandon still here? Does Brandon have to take off? Okay. Renee, that means you're up to bat.
Hello, my name is Renee Commons, and I am a resident of the Triangle. I actually live just a little bit north of the Triangle there on the corner behind the 7-Eleven, and I have 2 high school children. I'm married, and we like to access the Triangle area very much. And I'm also a member of the Junction Neighborhood Association with Erica Karlovitz, and I was very pleased when Susan McLean started the advisory board, which she opened up to not only the community association leaders and businesses, but to the community at large. And we went through a series of meetings over, oops, where is it up there? I'm a little nervous, sorry. Over since March 2010, and we were very hopeful, as we got started. Denny was great, and we were very pleased with what's happened in the neighborhood so far with the Links project. It's an L65 building with lots of new little vibrant businesses opening up in the area. We respect, what Alki Lumber has vested in the area as a commercial zone, and I felt like Susan did a good job of educating them that they wouldn't have to change their zoning. We would just, for new zoning and new businesses, change potentially to the NC3, which would benefit the pedestrian experience. So the meetings went on, and we started talking. Denny said, let's move outside of the box. What kind of great things can we do here? And, the sky's the limit. This is, a big area. And I was like, wow, in the past when they had earlier community groups talking about this is going years back, they talked about a gateway to West Seattle. So I had big high hopes of a broader open space in that area, so that when you came into West Seattle, this would be sort of the hub, the gateway to go up to the junction along Alaska, and to really have a visual kind of focal point for our neighborhood. Envision something like a pedestrian plaza with a fountain, something that would draw us all in. And then Susan McLean started talking about, maybe we could consider, in addition to the NC3 zoning, going up to the NC L85. And I had a little bit of a sour taste in my mouth coming off spending a year working with the community on the Connor project. So I was a little bit cautious, just because we like working with some. The community feels like we get supported very well by some builders, and in other cases we have to fight really hard to protect our pedestrian experience. And I love living in West Seattle, and I hate to see that pedestrian, small business lifestyle kind of neighborhood character go away. And I think it can extend into the Triangle, and Susan did a great job identifying, some of the quirky little kind of commercial historical things there, like the Tim's Automotive, but we also have the YMCA there too. And it's not really buffered by a park now or greenery at all. So, we talked about, well, what can we do for parking and get more trees in there, and that was all good.
That's good. Don't worry, keep going.
Yeah, so what I was going to say was, then it went on and went on. We had more meetings. I wasn't able to attend them all, and the open houses were great that Susan put on up here. But as time grew, the project proceeded, I could see a real strength towards doing the L85, and the only give back was a few little bit green spaces, a pedestrian designation along Alaska, which is fine, but we weren't gaining any significant areas for pedestrians, or we weren't addressing a really cool way to make that intersection beautiful so everybody can walk all ways, or how the cyclists and everybody's going to get around once Trader Joe's is in there. We're all excited about Trader Joe's coming, and we really need solutions that can engage bikers and pedestrians. And I'm not opposed to L85, except when it abuts the thank you. When the lower zoning and blocks views, that's critical. But looking over the plan, we were really concerned that just even with the setbacks that Mr. Healing's talking about, we still weren't getting a significant amount of setback for sidewalks and plaza space, because we don't want that canyon effect. And years ago, when the junction was rezoned, we are now working with the Murals project, which is L85, and across the street from Erskine, a little further south on California, the two kind of canyon big L85 buildings. And so with the Connor project, we wanted to make sure that they recognized the neighborhood design guidelines and did the setbacks and mitigated the mass, and that was just such a big struggle. So when I talked to Mr. Burgess's associate about, well, how do we ensure that they really follow through and we get the most out of these buildings? We work with these builders, and he said, well, you just kind of have to do like you did with the Connor project. And well, that was a year out of my life of really caring about the community and giving up family time and going and lobbying with DPD to try and get it to be the best it could be. So I care about the neighborhood, and I think there's lots of potential. And last thing to say, the new development standards to control the bulk are, I don't feel they're sufficient. And when we say apply incentive zoning provisions in the L85 areas, I don't think they're enough for the community.
When you talk about controlling the bulk, are you talking about stepping it back after a certain height and that kind of stuff?
I think so, yeah. Creating, if we're going to go up and not block views, I think it's really important to challenge the architects and the builders to build something that's very dynamic and long-lasting, to ensure that we have a vibrant neighborhood and not just disposable buildings that are just trying to bulk out and use, build to the maximum potential of the zoning.
Yeah.
We did get some green spaces, but it's connecting residents, different commercial buildings. It's not really for the public at large.
Yeah. And you're the probably the third or fourth person to bring up, the boulevard discussions and the Alaska Fauntleroy intersection series of intersections that are challenging no matter what mode of transportation you're in. Whether you're the car trying to figure out which lane you're supposed to be in, or, heaven forbid, the bicyclist or the pedestrian.
I'm still trying to imagine how it's going to work with I'm sure the transportation department's working on it, but with Trader Joe's in there, every time I come up from Fauntleroy, I'm like, wow, how those people even get into Trader Joe's with all that traffic, and Oregon's busy. We needs to be a lot of thought.
And then the hole will get filled in.
And the holes get filled in, yes. Thank you.
Councilmember Rasmussen.
Do you think there's an opportunity for more green space or greater green space within city-owned property, city right-of-way, or any other property that may be owned by the city? Or would we have to acquire it in order to create the greenway effect, or the gateway effect, and the boulevard?
Well, I did talk to Susan McLean, thank you, it's a good question, about the gas station on that corner right now. It seems to be opening and closing repetitively here over the last year. And I'm like, well, isn't that something that, either the builder or whoever's developing could work with the city, and the city could acquire it, and take over that space, or just give back on those corner spaces, buy out that other gas station, work it into another corner part of the lot or something, because it's just, I think it takes some vision, yeah.
So there would be some acquisition.
Yeah, I think
Right.
with acquisition, it could be a much more pleasant, vibrant neighborhood.
Thanks. So actually, Renee is the last person who had signed up. Is there anybody who has been moved by what they've heard to pop up and testify who did not have a chance to sign up? Yes, sir. Go ahead. Uh-oh.
My name is Art Baker, and I'm just a regular citizen here. I live down in California a couple of blocks.
We like regular citizens.
Okay. There's a disconnect between what all the engineering staff creating all these zones and how we as the public utilize that, what they envision and what we actually utilize in terms of parking and pedestrian walking and all that. And I'll give you just one little example here really quickly. Up until a month, 6 weeks ago, the 9th largest liquor store in the entire state by dollar volume was right across the street. And on the back side of it was a nice public parking lot, so people could zip in and out. Now it's moved a couple of blocks over here underneath the QFC. And there is some parking in the building, but it's quite disconnected. So what's happened is we got a huge demand of parking out on the street right around the liquor store itself. And the buses, we have a stop in that same night, can no longer get into the bus stop. And we're loading and unloading out in the street, actually, to utilize that because of all this demand for parking on the street for those people that want to get into the liquor store. Last night I attended the transportation meeting with Councilman Rasmussen, and there was lots of discussion there about what everybody envisions in terms of the 9-day closure and 4 years after that and all that. And it's going to be an interesting experiment of what the engineers say we ought to do and what the public is actually going to use it. So we got down here in the junction, we got a 7-story building going in here, 2 of them actually, here starting after the first of the year, all of which are going to impact parking. And it's great that we're going to have 13-foot sidewalks around it and a pass-through in the block and all that kind of thing. But it's just more and more demand for parking, if you will, and people want to park close. So now you're going to develop this triangle, and you're going to put 85-foot buildings in there and all this development. And I'm sure there are parking requirements off-street for some of these larger buildings, but to meet whatever the code is. But it seems like whatever the code is ought to be doubled about that, because if people are trying to get at, like the lady said about Trader Joe's, people from all over are going to be coming to that, and the demand for it's there, and how the public is going to use it is not necessarily how all of you engineers think it's going to be used. And so it just needs to be, you need to be more aware of, the public doesn't necessarily have an engineering mind and a common sense mind in terms of how you're using what you're designing.
Thank you. Anybody else at this point? Okay. So we'll go ahead and conclude tonight's public hearing. I want to thank everybody for being out here tonight. I'll just let you know what is the likely trajectory now for council's further consideration of the proposal. So the next time this comes before council will be Wednesday, November 16th. That's a 9:30 a.m. Seattle City Council Chambers meeting. The next meeting after that is Wednesday, November 30th. And then the next time that it could come up before the committee is Wednesday, December 14th. And at this point, we're early enough in the council's consideration, having just had the public hearing tonight, that I actually don't know if there will be a vote between now and the end of the year. It depends on questions that people wrote down today. A lot of the comments that you all have brought up send us back to then ask questions of staff about how the proposal was put together, why certain things were left out, why certain things were pursued. And then we figure out what questions council members have and want to pursue further. If you would like to keep track of this, many of you are already keeping close track of it via either Councilmember Rasmussen's office, my office, or Susan McLean with Department of Planning and Development. But if you want more information, those are the three folks to contact. And it's first name, last name at seattle.gov. And there are materials here up on the board on the table as you leave that will have email information and contact information. So with that, if I could thank David Yeworth and Dan Nolte from my office for setting up the conversation we had before the meeting. Thank you to Seattle Channel and to the AV folks, and we are adjourned.